Welcome to Season 23 of the Business Infrastructure Podcast. Hi there, I'm Alicia Butler Pierre, host of the Business Infrastructure Podcast. Before we get started, subscribe to this channel, hit the notification bell so that you'll know when other episodes come. Welcome back to Season 23. If you've been following along this season, then you know that it's dedicated to growth strategies. It's structured as a masterclass featuring experts and tools to scale your operations, revenue, and profitability. As each subject matter expert is interviewed, I follow up with a monologue like the one you're about to hear, so that you have the benefit of knowing how to apply the information shared by each expert. This episode actually features the second part of our interview with entrepreneur Christina Barsi. It was so good, we had to split it into two conversations. So this isn't quite a monologue, it's still a continuation of our original interview. So as Barsi describes her tool for building personal infrastructure, you'll be able to follow along with me as I apply it to myself and my business growth goals. This is perhaps one of the most revelatory things I've done this year. Don't be surprised if you also have a revelation you didn't see coming. This is episode 297, using Christina Barsi's Circle of Ease tool to build personal infrastructure. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We ended part one of this interview with Christina Barsi, better known as simply Barsi, explaining what personal infrastructure is. There's a tool she has called the Circle of Ease to build that personal infrastructure. Barsi, welcome back. For those of you who may not have listened to part one of this interview, can we start with you explaining what led you to creating a tool for building personal infrastructure?
Try not to be as long-winded as I tend to be, but I was very burnt out for various reasons, and I was trying to dig myself out of that hole and trying to find ways to bring myself back into alignment, ultimately, into calibration, into a place that I know how to feel good, and I wasn't. I couldn't figure out how to even get into the process of it again. So I had to simplify it as much as possible. And that's kind of where some of this strategy comes from. First thing I want to define is the difference between your zone of genius and your zone of excellence. Many of us as entrepreneurs and doers are really good at a lot of things. Your zone of genius, that's the stuff that you have a wealth of energy for. It doesn't drain you. You could talk about it all day long and have just more energy from it. It's regenerative. Where the other stuff that you're really good at, eventually it will tire you out. You won't be able to do it forever. It's not an infinite well of energy, but you are great at it. So there's a difference there. And I think we often get stuck in our zone of excellence, especially as entrepreneurs. Like, well, I'm good at it. It does its job and that's it. But I don't feel like it's working and I don't know why. It's because you're not operating enough in your zone of genius.
So if I may recap quickly here, Barsi, it was your personal quest to find fulfilling work that led you to discovering this difference between your zone of genius and your zone of excellence. I know these are both critical areas of your Circle of Ease tool to help us build our personal infrastructure, right? Can you explain what the Circle of Ease looks like?
So the center of your Circle of Ease, it's basically looks a lot like a brainstorm map with the bubble in the middle, and then you draw lines and there's bubbles on the outside. But we're in the center. You have to do some pre-work with this. That pre-work is really about getting clear on what your core desires really are. And the reason I say desires and not core values, because they're values, you value these things too. But they're really the stuff that if no one was watching and no one judged you, this is how you would actually live your life. Let's say you had a child dream of being a singer or something like that. Or, whatever the thing is that your kid self wanted, or the dream that you put to bed because it wasn't practical, or, whatever the reason. Oftentimes there's some gold sitting there for us to start to pay attention to and wonder about. And being curious is key here. It's really wondering, I wonder what would happen or what it would feel like if fill in the blank. And those can be exploratory questions to start to understand what is really at the center of what you want to experience. And then you go through like a distillation process. Okay, let's go with the singer idea. Well, what is it about that that feels good? Is it because you get to inspire people with your music? Is it because, you imagine yourself as a pop star and it sounds really fun and energetic and there's movement involved? Like there's more to it than that sounds nice or that seemed cool when I was 5 years old. And if we start thinking about the things we want in this way, we start to see what's missing. Oh my gosh, I'm not having enough fun in my life. There's a big category of something missing. Or, I notice that everything that fills me up, that I have endless energy for, is when I'm speaking from a place of inspiration. That one's for me. Like the conversation we're having today. I could talk to you for hours. It's why I'm so long-winded about it. So I apologize for that, but it feels so good to me. So, things that are inspiring.
This is good. Okay, so at this point, we have a sheet of physical or digital paper, and we've drawn a brainstorm bubble or a cloud-like bubble in the center of that page. That's where we write our core desires, and it speaks to our zone of genius. So I've drawn a bubble in the center of a digital piece of paper on my tablet, and inside I've written international travel, freedom from daily operations, CEO, international business, and teaching. What's next?
Then you draw little bubbles all around the big circle, like flower petals. It's no lines, just little bubbles around it. And you decide what you want to map. So maybe it's your business. Let's go with that. I have a podcast agency. So the things I'm going to put in the little petals fall into my zone of excellence. And these are the things that I'm really good at. I don't have to think about really hard. They get done. They're done really well. And they make me the expert that I am in the field that I'm in. They're in my zone of excellence because they're not necessarily inspiring me, or I can't do them forever. They don't feel like they are connected to that part unless I'm doing my own podcast. Be Bold Begin. I love creating that show. That goes inside my zone of genius, middle center bubble, because it brings ease into my life. That's why it's called the circle of ease. The rest, I could delegate. I could delegate every single other thing I have to do for my business, and that would be fine. It doesn't bring anything to me anymore. It doesn't fill me up in any way. So, but I'm good at it. So it goes in the petals. The stuff that goes on the outside, so you draw lines and then you draw another collection of bubbles on the outer sort of circumference of all of this. And the things that go in there fall into stuff that maybe it's hard for different reasons. Maybe it's difficult because you're learning something new and that stage is just a little trickier and it takes time. But it's understanding the difference between the stages too. Maybe another one is just difficult because you have to do it as part of the job, but you would like to get good at it enough to be able to delegate it. So you want to move it into a petal circle, but maybe you can't yet because of whatever reason. Maybe you can't afford to hire someone yet. Maybe you want to understand it better first so you can manage it better later. So this is a calibration alignment tool. You keep coming back to it. And what it shows you at first is how much percentage, how many bubbles is in the outside, how many bubbles are in the petals, and then do you have any bubbles in the middle? Oftentimes you don't, and you have to work towards that. So it gives you a lot of clarification. So then you can become intentional. This is where the strategy comes in.
Barsi, this is brilliant. It's a visual way to understand how to move things about in your life, to either shift things that are hard toward an inner circle or petal, while also figuring out what you can delegate. Here's what I have in my diagram. I've drawn another layer of bubbles surrounding the center bubble. I happen to draw 6 of them. Inside of those 6 bubbles are things like podcast production, process mapping, project management. And these things represent my zone of excellence. In other words, I'm really good at these things, but I don't enjoy the administrative or maintenance portion of that work. I enjoy the original creation of that work. I never thought about it that way until going through this exercise. So this is interesting. Next, I drew a third outer layer of bubbles, and this represents the stuff that I'm learning that I know is necessary for me to achieve more things in my zone of genius. I also need to go through the painful learning curve so that I can figure out what to start delegating as those activities move from the outer layer into the inner layer of bubbles. In my third layer are the things I've had to learn as I transition my company's business model from consulting to training. Things like the painful process of drafting, reviewing, and negotiating legal contracts, acquiring a new business license for my commercial office, the accounting practices for managing a business with international operations. All of those things have involved steep learning curves. And at this point, it's taken half of 2024 to learn and develop processes around these things. So now that I have my circle of ease completed for my personal desires as it relates to my business, what comes next?
Then you can make a plan. All right, which one of these is the most painful? Needs to change first. And you pick one, and then you create a small, approachable, kind, gentle action plan. And then the bubbles start to shift. And some go away because you handed them off to someone else who loves to do that thing that you don't like to do anymore. And now you're, paying it forward as well because you're putting it in someone else's zone of genius instead of giving it to someone who also hates it. We want to try not to do that. So there's a way to kind of start making decisions in a really intentional way for you and for those that you bring on to help you. And it really paints a picture of where you're at any given moment with something, whether it's a business, a creative project, an idea, something else. You can really use it in lots of different ways. And then you start making a plan for calibrating it in a way that feels more in tune with what you actually want to experience in your life and in your business. So you start to calibrate everything to align with who you really are.
Got it. In looking at my circle of ease, I'd like to start looking at the accounting bubble that's in the outer layer. This is painful for a number of reasons, starting with the fact that I had to fire the firm handling our taxes and bookkeeping a couple of months ago due to a huge mistake they made that cost us a lot of money. Since I fired them, I've learned more about the inner workings of how the Department of Labor, the IRS, and the Department of Revenue work, more than I ever thought I'd learn. And though it's been painful, I appreciate it now because I know it for myself, and I'm in an even better position to find a new accounting firm because I'll know exactly what questions to ask. I'll know exactly what things to look for. I can even work with someone else on my team to set up our internal auditing processes so that we can start to check the work of this new accounting firm. And to your point, Barsi, this will start to shift some of those things around as I'm able to delegate more of those responsibilities. My work will then become more about management and oversight than getting deep into the details. What are some other ways or techniques that you suggest for moving things around in a circle of ease?
So there's a few ways to change the outer circles. If it's something that you're just learning, sometimes it just stops being hard because you've learned it. And then you decide, does it go into the pedal circle where I get really good at it, but I keep doing it? Or maybe you delegate it right away because you're able to, and it pop the bubble, it moves on. Or it slides down into the zone of excellence, which is something you get really good at, but you have to keep doing it for whatever reason. Sometimes we can't afford to delegate it yet, or it's part of the process still. Usually you get really good at it, or you make a new assessment like, hey, I actually like this now that I'm great at it. I'm actually good with this. And you decide where it goes after that. Or you're like, well, I'm good at this now. I know how it works. I don't want to do it. Then maybe it's something you need to figure out how to pass off. So it can change multiple ways. Sometimes you need to change everything. And maybe none of it is really what you want anymore. And that's eye-opening and really difficult, and is part of the process of change and pivots and getting what you actually want in life. And we have to look at it in order for that to occur.
Barsi, at what point do you recommend we revisit our circle of ease once we've created it?
The idea is that you work with it continuously, and the times that you take a break from the actual diagram itself is when you're working the action plan that you've created to shift. Then you come back and you redo it to see if things have shifted. And what usually happens when we start creating some kind of change in our life is that it affects other things too. So it might affect the way your whole diagram looks. You might end up with a whole different business.
That's exactly what happened to me. I have a vision for a completely new business model. And even though I shared that at the beginning of this Growth Strategies Masterclass, it wasn't until I sketched this circle of ease that it became apparent why the old consulting business model no longer served me personally.
Because when you start getting into change, more things, you open up other cans of worms, essentially. Usually it's a little bit permeating. So really you want to spend a little bit of time on a very simple action plan. Let's just try these couple of steps, see how that feels. It's a whole process that I'm actually building a course where we use this tool and calibrate from the point of awareness all the way to sort of aligned and embodied action planning, so that you know how to use this tool consistently. The goal is to decide intentionally, what needs to shift, and then creating small action plans to bring that into fruition, and then reassessing. And the journey always gets confusing, which is why I think it really does need a full supported course and sort of community around, guidance around how to keep going with this.
I can see how this would have helped me level set or calibrate, as you describe it, after I did the lean canvas exercise at the beginning of this masterclass, or maybe before.
Yeah, New Year's are always great to kind of, birthdays, right? That's a personal New Year. To kind of be like, where am I at? What do I want next? When you're feeling like something needs to change, what needs to shift, that's a good time to draw one out and see where you're at.
And the circle of ease can help you make decisions too. Barsi, can you share more about the course that you mentioned?
Yes. So basically, you'll take a fun short quiz to see if you're operating in your zone of genius. You'll get kind of like an idea of where you're at sort of quickly. And then that unlocks the webinar for how to kind of walk through creating your own circle of ease. We'll go into a little bit more depth than we did here. And that's just a freebie. I'm not really selling you anything at the end of this webinar. So it really is just a gift. But once you're in my world, then, of course, you'll get notifications of when the course is ready to jump in on, if that's something you want to continue with. It's really great for people who are deciding what they want to do next. Oftentimes, we've built something painfully because it was our first business or, whatever the thing is. And we're like, yeah, I want to do this again, but it has to be different. It has to feel good this time. Or, or we want a personal brand because we're like, well, I have more to say, or I have a wealth of knowledge now that I want to share, or, I'm inspired because of whatever the reason be. And this is a great way to start that conversation with yourself so that your action steps are aligned with what you really want this time.
Well, I must tell you, Barsi, this was an eye-opening exercise for me. One of the things that this circle of ease has also helped me become comfortable with is accepting my role as a content creator. I always rejected that title, but I really should fully embrace it. You know why? Because I enjoy creating content and I'm naturally good at it. And most importantly, it feels good. Thanks for telling us more about your course and how listeners can gain access to the Circle of Ease tool. Do you have other resources you'd like to share with us?
Oh, sure. I did an audio event recently. LinkedIn has an audio feature now. I did a talk recently with just an amazing speaker who has a wealth of knowledge in sound studies, and I have a podcast production agency, so I thought this would be a good topic for people who are service providers within the podcasting space, because I launched a membership earlier this year for professionals within, particularly women professionals within the podcasting space, called the Women's Podcast Industry Network. And we're just trying to create ways to connect.
Well, we'll definitely have links to these resources in this episode's show notes. Barsi, unfortunately, our time together has come to an end. Thank you so much for this enlightening conversation. It was well worth the wait.
Oh, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to be on, and it was just a joy. So thank you for having me and letting me talk about the things I love.
Hopefully you understand why I keep Barsi close to me. She's a breath of fresh air, and I always love listening to her perspective on things. As a reminder, you can watch our extended interview, both parts, on YouTube. There you'll be able to see the circle of ease that I drew for myself. Keep in mind, this is not the official template from Barsi. It's important for me to not infringe on her intellectual property. So, if you want the real Circle of Ease template, then I strongly suggest you reach out to her personally or via her website. You can access her contact information at businessinfrastructure.tv. Again, that's businessinfrastructure.tv. Make sure you subscribe, click the notification bell so that you don't miss when that episode drops, and I'll see you in that next video.